Donald Trump has ordered new strikes on Iran, and once again, that world attention has shifted away from what was dominating the headlines just a short time ago. So over the past few days, the Epstein files has once again become one of the biggest political stories in the United States of America. People from all sides have been demanding more transparency, asking who knew what, who is mentioned in the records, whether the people will ever get the full truth or not. But almost overnight, the conversation changed entirely. Suddenly, every major news channel is leading with just one thing: Iran, military strikes, oil prices, and possibility of a much larger conflict in the Middle East. What's happening with Iran? Now, I want you to make something very clear before we just continue. The Trump administration says these strikes were carried out because of security concerns involving Iran and attack that threaten international shipping. So that is the official explanation. However, many political critics and commentators are asking whether the timing is simply the coincidence, or they argue basically every time the Epstein story starts gaining momentum, another major international crisis seems to dominate the news cycle every single time. So whether you agree with that argument or not, it is a clear question that is being discussed by many people right now. Now, the reason this question matters because Epstein's story is unlike almost any other political story in recent American history. It involves powerful people, unanswered questions, court records, victims who have spent years asking for justice, and people demands for transparency. Now, whenever new information appears on the table, millions of Americans immediately begin paying so much close attention. Social media explodes on this. News organizations start covering every single development, and people want answers back to back. They want to know whether everyone connected to Jeffrey Epstein will be treated equally under the law or not, regardless of their political influence or financial power, what they hold in this world. Then almost immediately, another crisis dominates the headline instantly. This time it is Iran. Television coverage changes. The discussion moves from the court documents to missiles, military operations, oil markets, and fear of wider regional conflicts all around the world. Now, once that happens, many of the conversation about Epstein naturally receives far less attention, right? So that is exactly why critics are questioning the timing here. They are asking whether this is simply how the news cycle works, or whether international crisis can sometimes push uncomfortable domestic issue into the background. Now, regardless of where you stand politically, one thing cannot be ignored totally. Whenever military action takes place, innocent people always get caught in the middle. They have to lose their lives. Governments make decisions, general plans, operation, political hold press conferences, but ordinary families are often the ones who suffer the consequences of this nasty stuff. Children, parents, doctors, teachers, people who have absolutely nothing to do with the international politics suddenly find themselves living in fear. Now, that human cost should never be forgotten, no matter which country is involved here. Supporters of President Trump argue that the president has a responsibility to respond when American interests or international shipping are threatened. Now, they believe showing military strength prevents even larger conflict in the future and sends a message that attacks will not go unanswered. They would say these strikes are about national security and protecting strategic interests, not about domestic politics. But on the other hand, critics, however, see the situation very differently. Pay attention to this. They believe the timing naturally raises questions because public attention has shifted so dramatically and so fast. They argue that whenever the country becomes deeply focused on one conversational domestic issue like Epstein files, another major international event suddenly dominates the headlines everywhere. Again, there is no public evidence proving that these military strikes were ordered to distract from the Epstein files or not, but that has not stopped people from asking whether the timing deserves the closer examination. Now, the bigger issue is what happens to public trust. Once people begin believing that governments use international crisis to change the political conversation, every future decision becomes much more difficult for the public to accept. Every action that may have legitimate security reason becomes viewed through a political lens very closely, very precisely. Now, this is why the transparency is so important in these kind of situations. If the governments want public confidence, they need to clearly explain not only what's really going on behind the doors, but what's really going on the table. Now, at the same time, the Epstein story is unlikely to disappear simply just because another international crisis has emerged just out of the blue. No, millions of Americans are still demanding the answers for the Epstein files. Victims are still seeking justice for this. Journalists continue investigating non-stop. Members of Congress continue asking questions over questions. Even if the headlines temporarily moves elsewhere, the underlying question remains exactly the same in the same point. That is why many people believe America should be capable of focusing on more than one issue in the same time. Now, national security matters a lot. Of course, it does matters a lot. Military decision, it matters a lot because we have to protect our national interests. At the same time, accountability, transparency, and the justice also matters so much. One story should not automatically erase another one. That is unfair. Citizens have every right to follow developments overseas while continuing to demand answers. What's really happening inside the country, important issues, probably what's really going on with them. So as this situation develops, the most important thing is to separate facts from the opinions. So the confirmed fact is that the United States has carried out the new military strikes against Iranian targets, and the administration says they were based on security concerns. This is what they say. So the opinion being expressed by many critics is that the timing benefits the White House because attention has shifted away from the renewed discussion of Epstein files. Those are two different things, and it is important to recognize the difference while still allowing the room for legitimate public debate to ask. Now, over coming days, everyone will be watching to see what exactly happens next. Will these strikes remain limited, or will this conflict expand into much larger conflict? So will the Epstein story continue to receive attention despite the international crisis or not? We will see that. And more importantly, will Congress demand more answers on both issues? So those are the questions that will shape the political conversations in the week ahead. One thing is very certain: wars have consequences far beyond politics. That is very clear. Markets, they react. Oil prices move. Diplomatic relationships, they become so strained. Military, family, races, uncertainty. Civilians, often they pay the highest price. This is why every decision involving military forces deserves careful public scrutiny. Whether you support the strikes or not, or you oppose them, asking difficult questions is not unpatriotic. It is a part of a healthy democracy. As both Iran conflict and the Epstein story continue to unfold, Americans will be watching closely, demanding answers, and deciding for themselves whether the timing of these events is simply coincidence or something more underneath the table. So let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe and stay up to date for some more important updates, because we don't cover some bullshit. We cover some important things, what's really happening in America and all around the world, what is affecting the world in America. Thank you. See you in the next video.